Hello friends, I'm not dead, mostly. It's been a pretty hellish 6 months. The last video I made, I talked about the fact that I was going to be making some sand filters out of these things, and while I was in the process of working on those, I ended up picking up COVID from one of the jobs that I do contract work for because I live in small town America, and part of small town America is a bunch of stupid babies refusing to wear masks because it's my personal freedom. It was just a big disaster. I got incredibly sick, and one of the side effects of that was it completely screwed up my vagus nerve. I lost the ability to talk for a really long time, and it returned pretty slowly. Like, it started at the very, very bottom range of my vocal range, and it very slowly improved back into normal areas. For a long time, the lower set of chords would work, but the upper sets wouldn't do anything. Like, I'd try to use them and it would just be like squeaky rubber. And then once I got to where I could talk well enough to be understood and kind of sort of sound like me again, I still ran into the issue that if I talked for very long, I would start to lose the ability to actually control them. So I'd start having breaks, or I'd start having fluctuating pitch that I didn't intend to have, where it would just be all over the chart, and it would go from like
helium voice
to just for no reason. So I wasn't able to really do any videos as a result of that until I got the ability to actually maintain a pitch again. And about the time that I finally got to where I could talk correctly, we had that big freeze in Texas. And I don't live in Texas, but I am right on the side. The cold weather hit us. We maintained power through most of it, but we got the brunt of the cold. We got the snow. I ran into a major issue with the big tank, and that is it had about this much room between the concrete wall and the tank. And a few years ago, we had a really bad cold snap that caused the temperature to drop enough that I lost a couple of fish, so I insulated the back of the tank, but it was so cold for so long that it didn't do any good. And the floor itself was 14 degrees, and the tank sits on the floor. There was just no way to keep heat in this tank. And then on top of that, we lost power for a long time. Basically everything died. When the power came back out, I went out and I got a stock tank and transferred as much of the water over as I could and as many of the fish as I could rescue, but of all of my angelfish, I now have 5 left. Of my 30 or so Corydoras, I have 1. Of my, I don't know, somewhere 50 to 100 Plecostomus, they were breeding in the corner back there. I think I managed to get 2 out. I've got a handful of tetras and platies and guppies left, and that's basically it. Everything else is gone. Now, I've got a couple other larger tanks set up that were fine. I've got my baby South American cichlid tank here, and nobody in there died. It's 5 feet from the wall, it's elevated off the floor. Even with the cold weather and lots of power, it stayed warm enough that they were okay. My Pacu, the stupid 75-cent Pacu, are fine because they're in a cubby over here by the stairs. And that tank also stayed warm enough to be fine. But the big tank, it was just a disaster. I just can't deal with that. Some of the fish in here were really quite friendly as far as fish go. The speckled Severums, the big yellow guys, they were really nice. I was very attached to them. They died very early on. I managed to rescue one of the green Severums. It had enough just damage and anxiety from the cold water that even after I transferred into the saving tank, it died a day later. It's just a really heartbreaking thing. So this tank, it's gotta go. There's not any like major problems with the tank other than that. It's just that the design of the building is such that the way the tank works now, it's no good. I'm going to be building another one. I'm just going to be building it with the kinds of faults I've run into with this one in mind. God, my voice is, it's getting harder to talk already. During the pandemic, we weren't able to actually open the pet store as we had intended to, so all of my racks and all of my 10-gallon tanks and all these other things that I had set up for doing plant sales and small animal sales and things are basically useless. So what we're going to be doing is taking all of the racks and everything out, and I'm going to be making a new tank that starts about where this one is, but instead of ending over here in the corner, with, 26 linear feet, it's going to go the entire way around the entire room. This tank, in order to do anything with it, I have to throw on a bunch of weights, and I'd have to sink myself down in to do anything, and the whole thing would get mucky because I would kick up dust and silt. And I want to make something that I can actually do maintenance and design changes and things with. I went to California in, I don't know, maybe it was March of last year. I don't really remember. On my parents' property, they had a whole lot of dead manzanitas. They let me cut them all down and bring them back with me. So I've got just piles and piles and piles of manzanita wood that I really like the look of, and I really want to be able to use, but these logs, they're so heavy and waterlogged, I can't move them. I can't take them out. So, there was no way to take them out and replace them with something that I liked better. They're probably going to end up in the new tank, but they take up a lot of water space and they're not really interesting in the way that I like. I'm going to be going from a 4-foot tank to gradually reducing about the halfway point down to about 2 feet. Underneath that, I'm going to be putting my 55-gallon, 45-gallon that have, my lone African cichlid and things like that can't mix with anything else. I've got a whole bunch of cold water Corydoras that still need a tank because they can't go in the heated tank or they'll die. It's going to have a large section that's small enough that I can actually work in it without having to get in the tank. It's not going to be a whole lot bigger when it's done. It's probably going to be 5,000 gallons, maybe. So I'm going to be starting on that probably this week as soon as I get our taxes taken care of. I was thinking about doing short compilation videos of the builds just daily as I work on things, and then doing longer, less cut stuff that's more tutorial oriented up on Patreon. Just because something that's a little bit longer winded is gonna ruin my actual YouTube analytics. It's already bad enough with a lot of my older videos that people cut out of for no reason. Just immediately they start it up and they go, oh no, I just not interested 27 seconds in. But if it's a long video where there's not much going on, people aren't really going to want to watch that for the most part. So it's probably going to end up having to be a Patreon thing where people who actually want to see it and are going to watch more of it will actually go seek that out. The design is going to be a bit different. There were a lot of compromises in this tank just to make it cheap. The design isn't going to be anything like this. I'll probably throw up something tomorrow about my kind of general design style. The wood cost of something like this isn't tremendous, but the windows are very expensive, pumps are very expensive, the actual sealants are very expensive. I probably am going to have to spend $1,000 on epoxy for the new tank, and that's planning to have something that is using the cheaper epoxies that I do. I can't imagine what the cost would be with Pond Armor, probably $3,000 or $4,000. It'll be an adventure, so stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys in the next one.